Okay, so I'm Kevin DDR, um, Tetris the Grandmaster player, uh, Battle Garega enthusiast, video game, arcade, etc. enthusiast, pinball enthusiast, general enthusiast. I don't know. I don't know of a better way to describe myself. Um, so here we go. As I'm sure some of you guys have seen, I've started a Patreon thing about making informational videos for 90s arcade games, pinball, 90s retro games, whatever, 90s games, um, old game hardware, technology, monitors, etc. And I got quite a few donations immediately off the bat. And before we get started, I thought it might be a good idea to just start off strong with a video that a lot of people can use and hopefully a little precursor to what's to come in the future. So, for those of you watching this at a later time, I'm in Tokyo, in Japan right now. I'm staying here for almost a month to go to two Tetris tournaments, visit every single arcade I can find, and generally just have a good time for about a month. Uh, oh, hey System 11, how's it going? Okay, I guess let's get this going. So, Candy Cabs, a beginner's guide. Anyway, the gist of all of what I was trying to say, sorry about that, is that I thought the first thing that I could do is talk about Candy Cabs. I'm sure there will be some inaccuracies in here. I'm kind of doing this in one take. I actually did a full take of this earlier today instead of going out, which was pretty stupid. And I thought it was pretty good, but the sound quality didn't sound so great, and I kind of stumbled my way through a bit. So hopefully this attempt will be a little better. Alright, so let's get going. What is a candy cab? For those who don't know, if you watch my stream, you probably do know. If you don't, here we go. 80s and 90s generic Japanese arcade cabinet. So, to give a little context here, in America, in the golden age of arcade games, whatever you want to call it, I don't really think it was the golden age, but the 80s, games had dedicated cabinets mostly. The manufacturer would sell the game in a cabinet form, and the cabinet would have, a custom marquee and side art and like a custom control panel overlay and all of that stuff. And that was all fine and well for the kind of big, uh, spacious arcades at the time in America, but in Japan, that really wasn't an option. The arcade culture in Japan actually sort of grew out of what were called invader houses in the years after Space Invaders came out, which were basically just rooms full of cocktail cabinets of Space Invaders, which is a really funny concept to imagine. And there are some photos, and if you look at it, it's just mind blowing, to be honest. Um, so anyway, what happened is, when more and more games came out, arcades started having these generic cabinets that they could just take the PCB from, they could take the PCB from inside one cabinet and remove it and put in a new game PCB, and without much effort, they'd have a new game. And, with the rate of games coming out and limited space available, tight doorways, I mean, you couldn't be hauling in and out wooden stand-up arcade cabinets all the time. Another thing to consider is that at the invader houses, most of the cabinets were sit-down cabinets, right? So, sort of a sit-down arcade culture evolved, and as a result, most Japanese arcade cabinets are sit-down cabinets where you sit at them instead of stand-ups like they are in America, or were, as it were. So, thus was born the candy cabinet. Now, these are made usually out of some combination of ABS, plastic, fiberglass, and metal. Usually some combination of all three. Some tend to more towards the metal, some tend towards more the fiberglass, and some, like the Chinese clone cabs, are like basically completely ABS. Um, they all adhere, I shouldn't say all, most of them adhere or can adhere to the JAMA standard, which stands for Japanese Arcade Machine Manufacturers Association. Um, in, I believe, must have been the mid '80s or maybe the end of the '80s, something like that. Actually, it must have been the end of the '80s because Sega Tetris isn't a JAMA standard game, and that's 1988. A big group of arcade machine manufacturers, as the name implies, got together and said, hey, well, if we're going to have exchangeable boards, we need to have the same wiring for everything. So thus the JAMA standard was born. All this means is it's, there's a wiring harness that there's a certain pin layout that all these boards that are JAMA compatible adhere to. This is not always quite the case, but let's just say generally that's the case. Candy cabs are known for having... yes, that's a good point, System 11. There are some wood candy cabs as well. And I want to say the Swing is at least partially wood, the Sega Swing, but that thing is stupid. Kind of cool, though. So they usually have a pretty large, crispy monitor, but not always. There are some smaller cabinets, too, like the Cute, and a couple of the smaller Capcom cabinets as well. But generally, they have a large monitor. In the earlier cabs, kind of usually, 25-inch. In the later cabs, 29-inch. Although, really, 29-inch is 27-inch, but that's neither here nor there. And unlike American cabinets, which have those, thick wooden control panels, that if you open them up, you'll see on the underside there's, big buttons with huge micro switches, screwed into the bottom of the control panel. And, these ultra big hulking hapsticks that are basically bulletproof. Those were, in America, the controls needed to be durable, not necessarily precise. A lot of thought wasn't really put into whether or not the controls would be precise, mostly just durable. Whereas in Japan, the controls are, I shouldn't say they're less durable, because they are actually pretty damn durable and will take a serious beating. But they're kind of more precise, I think, better controls, usually made by Sanwa or Seimitsu. And because these cabinets have these little thin metal control panels, the buttons can actually just snap into place on them. The sticks still mount with, a mounting plate and stuff, but the point is that they're not American hap controls. And if you've ever played on an American cabinet, you know that those things kind of suck. So, alright. Got a nice little notification there. I should probably turn those off. Anyway. Why do you need a candy cab? Yes, that's a good point to make, too. The Dynamo cabs are, of course, metal panel, but usually even still with the metal panels, they, use hap parts, and hap parts really suck. And it does actually take some effort to modify them to fit Sanwa buttons and stuff, even the screw-in ones, because the holes are very slightly different size. So if you actually have holes that are exactly hap size, you need to enlarge them, which is really dumb. But I personally have actually done this. It sucks. So why do you need a candy cab? Oh, it's System 11 saying something. Okay, System 11 disagrees with me, I guess, but at least in general, if you're buying an American cab nowadays, video usually bad because they're all beat to shit. Audio usually bad because often speakers were just replaced with the cheapest, shittiest thing they could possibly find. Controls also kind of suck. But anyway, the point is that a candy cab is generally the authentic experience for Japanese games, and I think probably the best arcade experience even for some US games. The ease of switching games, if you're a person who wants to have one or two cabinets, and switch between however many different PCBs you have, is great. And I want to say they're relatively portable. Obviously, they are not portable, but compared to moving around a wood cabinet, they can actually be disassembled fairly extensively, which makes things nice for putting them in tricky places, like down 3 flights of narrow stairs, which I have done before, and it was an experience, I guess. So anyway, um, sorry. There are a lot of different choices for cabinets. Now, of course, when I say candy cabinets, I'm referring to pretty much all Japanese cabinets made through the mid 80s and all the way through the 90s, actually into the early 2000s. The Sega cabs, usually the City series of cabinets. Taito made some cabinets that are pretty well known, the Egret series. And then a few others made some cabinets as well, like Konami made the Windy cabinets, I think presumably mostly for their own arcades, although they did also sell them independently. And then Namco made the Cyberlead and Excelina cabinets. And of course, SNK, in America we have the iconic red Neo Geo cabinets. In Japan they had Neo Candies instead, which are candy cabinet versions of Neo Geos. So, let's first talk about the Sega City series. Because the reason why I picked them to go over first is... Oh god, what the... Jesus, sorry. This notification is getting out of control. Anyway, the Sega City series. Easy to find in the US, mostly, because they made a shitload of city cabinets. Astro City, Aero City, Blast City, Net City, New Net City, all of those. They made a shitload. And if you're in the UK, you can find a kind of bastardized version of the Net City called the Naomi Universal, which is a stand-up version of the Net City, basically. They also released some of those in Japan, but that's neither here nor there. They're usually kind of easy to find parts for. I mean, I say kind of, easy is relative, because, none of these things are being made anymore, so finding parts is a bit of a crapshoot. But just by virtue of them being relatively common, they are sort of...
Right on, man! Whoa, baby! What's the move?
Ah, geez, someone donated or something. I'll take a look at that later. Thank you very much. So, they have nice Nanao and Toshiba monitors generally. The earlier cabinets use Nanao MS8s and MS9s. Then the Blast uses a Nanao Trisync, and the new Net City and Net City... Well, the Net City uses a Nanao Nanao 31K only monitor, actually. And then the new Net City uses Trisyncs. Okay, so let's go into the individual cabs themselves. So, the Aero City was the second of the City cabinets, actually. There is one called the City, but for our purposes, we're really not going to be talking about it, because you're not going to be buying one of those. You're definitely not going to be buying one of those for your first cabinet. They are old. They are really old. I want to say, like, 87, maybe? 88? Something like that. They come with a Nanao MS8-26 monitor, which is the 26-inch cousin of the 29-inch MS8 in the original Astro City. It's a very nice monitor. In my opinion, it looks great for low-res games. And when I say low-res here, we're talking about JAMA era 15 kilohertz games. So, 240p or whatever you want to call it in console terms. Although 240p is a bit of a misnomer. The audio is mono. Very, very bad mono. Maybe my one in particular is incredibly blown out, but every Aero I've played on has really rough audio. So, be aware. It's going to be tinny. It's going to be shitty. And even better, the speakers are just directly connected to the JAMA Edge. There's not even like a volume pot. It's amplified audio, coming off of the JAMA Edge. No volume pot on the power supply or anything. So if your game doesn't have a volume pot, which there are very few that don't, that you'd probably want to play, but if your game doesn't have a volume pot or the volume pot is shitty, you're going to have a bad time. It also has a unique control panel type compared to the other later City cabs. You can see my one on here on the right is... So, there was kind of a batch of Aero Cities that made their way to America shortly after those things came out. And operators, presumably for, ease of service, replaced all the control panels with these, like, hacked up Hap part control panels. This problem is easily resolved because you can get a new control panel from River Service. But, you know, like I said, they're a unique control panel type to the Aero City, so you can't just easily get any Astro Blast or Net City panel and just think it's going to work, because they don't. Alright, the new Astro City is... Well, I say new Astro City. There are two cabinets, actually. The Astro City and the new Astro City, which was the sequel to the Astro City. The original Astro City has a MS8, same as the Aero City, except it's the 29-inch version. As the cabinet calls it, a flat square 29, which is really funny because it's not flat, it's not square, it's rectangular, and it's not 29 inches. It's 27 inches. But, you know... Here we go. So those cabinets come with a mono sound, which you can convert to stereo with a official stereo amp and stuff. It's a little involved, but the sound is not bad. It's not great, but it's much better than the Aero City anyway, that's for sure. And with the new Astro, you can actually replace the speakers with some Cambridge Soundworks ones that you gut and take the drivers out of. And they sound pretty good once you've done that. Rarity-wise, these cabinets are really common. Even still today, nowadays in Japan, if you look at a lot of arcades that do have candy cabs, you see a ton of Aero Cities. I mean, Ebisen is entirely Aero Cities, or at least almost entirely. I think entirely. You know, Pier 21 has some... a lot of the kind of... You know, Mikado has a bunch. A lot of the, like, retro arcades have a ton of Astro Cities. Price-wise, I think in the U.S. you're looking to spend about $500 to $750. I put the question mark there because, you know, prices are what they are. They seem to constantly be going up. I paid $750 for my very nice one. That's actually in this photo. And looking at this photo makes me really sad because I definitely dinged it up at some point moving it, and now I feel bad. But it's a very nice cabinet still. Plays great. Has a really, really crisp monitor. The MS9, in my opinion, is probably the best low-res monitor of all of them. They have the modern Sega panel, so as opposed to the... I call it a Sega panel because it's the panel that the Astro, Blast, and Net City, and Versus City, and the other odds and ends cabs there all used. So, the nice thing about that is if you have a two-player panel, or a two-player three-button, you know, two-player six-button, meaning 3 buttons for each player, which is the JAMA standard, A, B, and C buttons, and a D button is kind of on a unofficial pin on the JAMA harness, and then E and F, which are, you know, your other two medium and heavy kick buttons. Those and the D button are usually attached, in the case of non-Neo Geo stuff, to a kick harness, which is manufacturer, like, you know, PCB dependent. So say you have a 6-button panel and you want a 12-button panel, no problem. You just buy one and put it in. It's basically that simple. There are some people selling repros of those. The originals are just not that hard to find either. Or if you have the game, if you have the monitor rotated for a shoot 'em up and you want a, you know, single player panel, or you have like a head-to-head versus, you know, Street Fighter setup or something with a cabinet splitter, you can get one-player panels as well that have the controls in the middle, which are very nice. So as I mentioned, the new Astro is Bisync, which is low-res 15K, you know, for JAMA games, and then 24K for medium-resolution games, of which there are quite a few. Some Sega games, of course, a lot of funky old Atari games as well are medium-res. That's kind of, I would say, more an advanced topic, but all you need to know is if there are any games that you know you want to play that are medium-res, you'll need the new Astro City instead of the original Astro. That's about it, though. I guess one other thing that I do want to mention, and a reason that I like this cabinet in particular, is because, at least in my experience, you don't tend to see that many really, really blown out Astro monitors. I don't know what it is, but the MS8 and MS9 seem to have held up over time much better in general and on average than the Blast City monitors. Why that is, I don't really know, but it just seems to be the case. And actually, from the arcades I've been at here as well recently, my suspicion from a small sample size has been confirmed in a much larger sample size. The blast monitors, on average, tend to be fairly rough. Um, of course, they look amazing when they are in good shape, but they just tend to not be in that great shape, while the Astros seem to be generally holding up better. So, just something to keep in mind again. The Blast City. Sorry, just looking at chat here real quick. Oh my god, there's a lot of people watching. Not that if you're watching this on YouTube later, you care about that. The Blast City is the sequel to the Astro City, or New Astro City, rather. This was Sega's first Trisync cab. Trisync meaning it supports 15K low res, 24K medium res, and 31K high res. Which high res, of course, literally just means VGA 640 by 480 progressive. But the reason why we call it high res is because obviously it is a higher resolution than both medium res and low res. So just a relative term there, of course. The monitor in these cabinets is usually either a Nanao MS2930 or a 2931 Trisync. Both of them are Trisyncs, but the 2930 has no on-screen display. It's not a, what we call a digital monitor, I guess. It has no on-screen display. It doesn't automatically switch resolutions. You have to flip jumpers or dip switches on the remote board, which is the little setting board inside the control panel for the monitor, which is not hard, but you have to remember to do it, because if you play a high-res game, if you feed a high-res signal into it while it's set to low-res, you in theory could blow up the monitor. You shouldn't, but don't do it, you dummy. So something to keep in mind as well. The 2931 is a monitor with an on-screen display. So instead of having the, potentiometers and stuff on the remote board, it just has buttons for going through the menus on screen and changing settings, of which there are a lot. In fact, the nice thing about that is some of the settings that, on the older monitors used to be potentiometers on the chassis, or actually even in some cases on the neck board of the monitor, are no longer those. They're just in the service menu on the on-screen display. So that means doing stuff like setting up your color calibration and stuff is a little easier on those. The 2931 is also a auto-sync monitor, so it will automatically switch to whatever resolution it thinks you're feeding it. The only problem with this is that occasionally it can get confused, and you have to do some weird shit to get it to work again, but by and large, that's not an issue. Sound is either mono or stereo, depending on... it will be 2 mono speakers, of course, or you can wire it up to stereo with the stereo amp and harness and stuff for, JVS games that support it. These cabinets are really common. They made a lot of them. A lot of them got shipped over to the US. And also, some Sega Bass Fishing was a game that used a Blast City even when released in the US, and it had a crazy fishing rod control panel, which again fits in the standard Sega panel size. So another fun thing you can do with these cabs is get crazy stuff like the Super Monkey Ball, or not Super Monkey Ball, the Monkey Ball banana joystick panel and stuff like that. There's quite a few unique panels as well that are pretty cool. The Bishibashi panel as well. Did I say Bishibashi panel? Because that'd be pretty funny. Anyway, Bishibashi panel. In case you want to play that game but don't want to have the giant full-size pop-in music button cabinet. Price. I would say $500 to $900 maybe. Prices are really hard. I mean, you could get some pretty cheap beat-up cabinets. I got 5 Blast Cities for, I want to say either $2,000 or $2,500. They were beat to shit. But a nice one can go for probably even almost up to $1,000. I wouldn't pay $1,000, but you definitely could. as I said, they have the modern Sega panel, so that's a nice thing. Now, the big improvement with this cab over the Astro for transportation is that the control panel, like, okay, let's go back. So if you see here, and it's kind of hard to tell from my photo, this whole bottom part below the control panel and the front of the cabinet is just one giant piece. What this means is that you can't just take the control panel off, turn the cabinet sideways, and get it through a door. But with the Blast City, you can tell that they actually took the whole control panel unit and basically just like bolted it to the front of the cabinet. So if you want to take it off, and get the cabinet through a doorway, you can actually just take the control panel off, which is very nice. I did that recently to get one into my room, and yeah, it was good. The other big advantage to that is that the Astro has a tendency to, and of course this isn't an issue if you're not a dumbass, but as a buyer of a cabinet from a place where potentially there were dumbasses, if someone puts a lot of pressure or like sits on an Astro City control panel, it can tend to crack right here. Usually the crack is just kind of, a surface thing and not really a structural problem, but it's pretty ugly, and you can reinforce them, but again, it's a thing. It doesn't really happen on the Blast City, so just something to keep in mind. So, the successor. Oh yeah, one more thing I should say about the Blast City is, of course, the 2930 and the 2931 are infamous for being just total nightmares to fix. And as someone who has recently been working on one, I can confirm it's a total nightmare. But they do look really good when they're working. Now, most 2930s and 2931s at this point, you'll notice that in the corners of the screen, the convergence of the three colors, RGB, tends to be really bad. Like, I don't know why. I don't claim to have any understanding of why it happens, but specifically to 2930 and 31, they end up having really, really bad corner convergence. You can fix this, but it's a pain. It involves, sticking some magnetic strips inside your monitor, which is not that hard, but it can be intimidating for newer people, so just something to consider again. But if you have a working one, the real nice thing about the Blast City monitor, compared to any of the other Tri-Syncs, at least in my experience, is that low-res on the Blast City monitor truly looks like, an MS9 or something like that. It looks like a real low-res only monitor, and high-res looks very crisp and sharp. Now, with the later cabinets that have the flat Tri-Sync monitors, usually the low-res mode, it's hard to explain, but it looks good, but it is very clearly not, an old low-res only monitor, is all I can say. It looks different. It is very sharp, but the scan lines are, kind of fat. I think it has something to do with, the tube and chassis combination, but they do look very different. So, that's kind of the nice thing about the Blast, is that you gotta get you a cab who can do both, so to speak. So, the new Net City, after the Blast City, when the Naomi came out, which I'm sure a lot of you know about, it's the same hardware, more or less, as a Dreamcast. And in fact, that's why the Dreamcast had so many good arcade ports, was, it was just ports of Naomi games, which were, again, running on basically the same hardware. So, when the Naomi came out, Sega released a new cabinet series, the Net City, for Naomi games. And the Net City, I believe most of them shipped with a 31K only monitor, meaning they only work in high res. So, of course, no good for JAMA games. Although I think there were quite a few nowadays that have had their monitors replaced with a real Tri-Sync. But there are some that are definitely not Tri-Syncs, so, again, beware, make sure you know what you're buying. Now, the new Net City, that came with the Toshiba Pure Flat, or a Wea Tri-Sync, or a Samwa PFX, which is another, flat Tri-Sync monitor. The Toshiba Pure Flat is a really, really, really nice monitor, in my opinion. As System 11 points out, it does have a problem with some games which causes a very weird, sync. It's almost like a sync issue or something. There's a little bit of a weird wave on one side, but for most games that do work, which everything I own works with one. It's an incredibly crisp, nice picture, and in high res, it's astounding as well. The Waya monitor, not so much. A lot of cabinets that had their monitors die, if they were bought from another arcade or something, and they didn't have they didn't have the original warranty, or they couldn't just send it to Sega or anything. Since the Toshiba monitors were like sort of custom manufactured for Sega, in a way. I mean, they were made to a spec, and they weren't sold to the public. The schematics are not really out there. Toshiba actually used to like fix the monitors for people, and in fact, hilariously enough, if you want to get into some of the service menu settings, you needed like an official Toshiba remote board that you like plug into the monitor, and then it would unlock a hidden service menu. It turns out that people found out a way to spoof this with, some resistors and some other stuff to unlock the hidden service menu. But the point is, a lot of arcades just said fuck it and put in a Waya Trisync monitor instead. And the Wayas are kind of giant pieces of shit. When they work, they look pretty good. That's all I'll say. But often they don't work. Often they don't look pretty good. So, if you're going to get one of these, in my opinion, it's really, you're mostly paying for the Toshiba monitor, so make sure you get the Toshiba one. Sound is stereo from the factory. The amp is included inside the cabinet. You just plug in the stereo audio out from your Naomi or whatever. These cabinets, I would say, are semi-rare. They're not super rare, but obviously there aren't as many of them floating around in the US as there are Blasts and Astros. They usually sell for, I would say, somewhere between $800 and $1,200. Yeah, that's a good point too. There are now replacement boards which you can get the service board to do the service setting stuff. And, usually, at least in my experience, you really don't need to fuck with that stuff because these monitors are not old enough yet to have seriously developed problems. But, something to consider. So, yes, I would say $800 for one with, Waya, kind of beat up shape, $1,200 to the sky is the limit for a good pure flat one. Now, these cabinets by default are JVS. So, eventually what happened is the JAMA, the actual, not the JAMA harness, but the or JAMA standard, but the actual Japanese Arcade Machine Manufacturers Association said, we better come up with a new wiring standard and stuff for, modern high-res games. And they called it JAMA Video System, which is pretty funny because it doesn't specifically refer to the video output, but actually it refers to the controls and other wiring and stuff. So these cabinets come by default with JVS. What this means is that, if you look in like a Astro City or something, and you look inside the control panel, the controls go to these little breakout amp up connectors, which then go to a harness inside the cabinet. On these cabinets, however, the control panel has the same connectors, different pin out, but the same connectors more or less, except they then go to an I/O board, and then out of the I/O board comes what looks like USB, but it's actually not USB. It's a different protocol over the same connector. So it's a USB cable, but not just USB. And that's used for Naomi and a lot of modern stuff, the PC based games, like Taito Type X stuff, etc. But of course, if you want to play JAMA games, you need some way to run JAMA wiring in your cabinet or convert the JVS output to JAMA. So there's a few options for doing this. You could get harnesses to do this. Now, as to who sells these currently, I'm not sure. I think River Service may still sell them. Franco B used to, but he has stopped. You could get a harness. So there's two routes to go down, the harness route or the adapter route. With the harness route, you basically just install a giant harness inside your cabinet that has, power going out, from the power supply to a JAMA edge, connection to the monitor, and it basically provides another. So like the control panel has a set of male amp ups coming out from it into female amp ups in the cabinet. The harness just provides another set of female amp ups that go straight to a JAMA edge. So all you need to do to switch between the two is basically plug in some different audio, connect the monitor to the VGA coming out of the harness, and then switch your controls to the other set of amp up connectors. So yeah, you can still get those. They exist. I mean, they're not that hard to find. I just don't know if anyone is actually still currently making them. But either way, you could probably get one. Or likely, if you're buying the cab from another collector, they'll probably either already have one or know where to find one. The other route you could go down is an adapter, which actually takes the output from the GVSIO board, which is already kind of unfortunately laggy, and then some of the adapters suck and add more lag, and unless you really just don't care, I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably go the harness route myself. Now, yes, actually, as Anonymous points out in chat, which I should have mentioned, these cabs are really easy to do MAME with, or, you could get a JVS pack, or you could do what I did, which is wire up a PS360 Plus to the controls. And then, so now I have video, because it's a true tri-sync, I can output 240p from a console, have my cabinet, hooked up through JAMA to the controls. I have a basically JAMA to PS360 board that I built. And then, I have the video coming in from RGB, with some resistors and stuff plugged into VGA. The point is, it's very easy to make a MAME cabinet out of these, or, hook them up to consoles, which, I guess this is verboten, but I've done it. It works. It's fun. They're a really nice cabinet. I think they're beautiful. They're also really easy to disassemble. I wish I had... Hold on a sec. I have a funny photo for you. Let's see if I can bring this up real quick. If I can't, I'm not going to fuck around. But I think I have a funny photo for you. It's too much effort. Anyway, you can completely tear these cabinets down. You can see these sort of like metal legs on the cabinets. Everything is like attached to those. They come off. The base separates from the top. The top separates from the legs. It's beautiful. It's some good time. And yes, as Anonymous points out, I actually did this mod myself as well. The speakers are pretty good, but they're not great. But you can also just replace them with some car speakers, and it's literally plug and play. I have some Pioneer ones. I'll maybe post the link to those in the comments, but they sound great. They are really, really good. Of course, the real only con with these cabinets is that they are fairly expensive and fairly hard to find, but I think well worth the money if they're in good shape. Okay. Next thing that we're going to talk about is the Taito cabinets, which is the Egret series of cabinets in general. This photo here is of Color Thief, a Tetris player. I'm sorry I didn't have a better photo of the Egret 29. I didn't want to steal someone's photo or anything, and, this is all I had at the moment. I have a better photo, but I couldn't find it from Japan. So, anyway, this is the Egret 29, which is the first of the Egret cabinets. Then it was followed up by the Egret 2 and 3, and also the Atomiswave cabinet, which is very similar to the Egret 3, actually, but they exclusively come with the shitty Wea monitors, as opposed to the Egret 3, which doesn't always. So, these cabinets are relatively hard to find in the US. They're, I think, very beautiful. I love the design of the 29. I think it's an amazing cabinet, and the 2 and 3 are also really nice, too. They generally tend to be in pretty good shape because they're less common. They've usually been imported more recently. And just for whatever reason, if the cabs were imported into the US much later and didn't see much, location play in the US, they tend to be nicer. It's just kind of how it is. They're pricey when they do show up. And the real nice thing is that they have an easy monitor rotation mech. Which is kind of cool. I probably should have taken a photo of it. I actually have a video of Mike Hager rotating this exact cabinet. So most cabinets, like the NewNet or Blast or Astro or whatever, you notice that there's a bezel and the monitor. You can just take the bezel off, and then you unscrew, the part where the monitor attaches, or rather the monitor frame attaches to the cabinet, and you literally just like pull the monitor out of the cabinet, rotate it 90 degrees, and then stick it back in, and screw it back in. And then you rotate the bezel and do the same thing, and that's not super hard to do, but monitors are heavy and it's a pain. I don't know. So, okay, this is gonna sound like a real dick thing to say, but, like, honestly, if you have any desire to rotate your monitor or play games that are both horizontal and vertical, buy 2 cabs. Just do it. Like, for the cost of getting an Egret 2 or something, you could have 2 Astros. Which is really funny because the Astro has the exact same monitor as the Egret 2, and we'll talk about that later, too. So, as I said, easy monitor rotation mech. The Taito cabinets, you literally just, like, pull the monitor out a little bit, and then it, like, locks, and then you spin it on this kind of turntable, and then push it back in. So you don't ever have to, like, pull it out of the cabinet, which makes it a much easier job for one person. I mean, you can do it with, the other cabs with one person, but it's not fun. And if you neck your monitor while rotating it, you will never forgive yourself. So for that reason, just buy 2 cabs. That's all I have to say. Yeah, System 11, I mean, I agree. If you have to have only one cab, the rotate mech is nice, but for the cost of an Egret 2 nowadays, you can literally just get 2 Astros. Get one horizontal, set one vertical, boom, you're done. So, and I guess I should have said specifically about the Egret 29, this cabinet is extremely rare. You will almost certainly not be able to buy one, so we're not going to talk about it any further. But they are really nice. The Egret 2 is a little more common, and by little more, I mean a lot more common. This cabinet you see in a lot of Taito arcades even nowadays, the Egret 2 and Egret 3. This is at Hei in Akihabara, which is Taito's kind of flagship arcade. They just have rows and rows of Egret 2s and Egret 3s. This cabinet has the same Nanao MS9 that's in the new Astro City. So for anyone who says, oh, the picture on the Egret 2 is so nice, they're just an idiot who doesn't know any better, because it's literally the exact same monitor as in the new Astro. So don't let anyone trick you into saying, oh, you got to get the Egret 2. No, you really don't. But they are nice. They are mono by default, or you can make them stereo with the Taito stereo amp. Rarity wise, I would say they're pretty rare. It's not really that they're super rare, but if you want one, you're going to be paying a lot. I say price 1,000 plus, but 1,000 nowadays is a pretty good deal. And as we mentioned, oh yeah, the control panel is this weird thing that the Egret 2 and Egret 3 only have. I guess it's not really weirder than Sega's thing, but there's not as many options out there for these cabinets. Finding the single player panels is prohibitively hard and expensive. Even finding a different 2-player one can be challenging. There are some repros out there, I think, but again, it's not as easy as the Sega cabs. They have the monitor rotation turntable mech, which is nice, but do you need it? I don't know. Unless you literally can only have one cab, as in absolutely cannot fit a second cab in your house, I wouldn't think it's a worthwhile feature. We're not talking about cost here, because as I said, you really can buy 2 other cabinets for the same price. So I can't say it enough, do take that into consideration. Now, System 11 also makes a good point here, which is that and I actually, when I was putting this together, I actually realized this too, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember they have problems with some games. One of the 5-volt pins is just missing on the Egret 2. It's not wired up to anything. So some games, like Moonwalker and a couple others, don't work, but you can fix that. It's just, again, something you have to do. So the Egret 3, I actually have a photo of these now, but I didn't when I put this together. But it doesn't really matter because they literally look identical, except the monitor is a flat monitor instead of a curved one. And strangely enough, too, the bezel is still curved. It's just that, like, the flat monitor kind of sits inside it. You'll see, it's a little unusual looking, but these cabinets either have a Toshiba PF or Waya Trisync. Almost all of them, at least I think nowadays, have the Waya Trisync in them. And the Waya Trisync, as we mentioned before, same as the Macvision Trisync, they kind of suck. They're unreliable. They shit out. Sometimes they lose a color. Sometimes the hot blows up in some horrible way. Generally, they're unreliable and not that great to begin with. The sound is, again, mono or stereo. The rarity is, I would say, pretty rare. The price is $1,200 plus, I would say. Control panel, same weird Egret 2-3 thing. Same crazy turntable mech. It's very nice looking, but also extremely expensive. And, if you get one, try and make sure you don't get the Waya. If you get the Waya, definitely the price should take that into account. So, those are the two kind of main series of cabinets you're likely to find. Or I would say the ones I recommend buying if you're a beginner. Other cabs that are definitely noteworthy are the Jalico pony cabs, which those actually have a real old school history going back to the very early candy cabs as well. They're functionally okay, but they all have, with the exception of, it's either the Mark III or the Mark IV, I forget now. One of them doesn't have a really crazy monitor angle, but the early ones are like almost horizontal. So, if that's not your thing, like they're almost flat to the ground like a cocktail. If that's not your thing, you probably don't want one of those cabs. Even the later ones, too, have a real, like, almost like a 45-degree monitor angle or something. Sorry, I'm just, like, looking at chat here. They are nice looking cabs, but I don't know. The monitor angle was a total deal breaker for me every time I've played on them, and for that reason, I probably wouldn't get one. Now, the Konami Windy is another cabinet. Again, it's sort of a Konami clone of the Egret 2 and, the new Astro City. I believe the Windy has a MS9. I probably should fact check myself on that, but either way, it has a kind of MS9 equivalent monitor. They're hard to find parts for just because they're hard to find. They are really cool looking cabinets, though. And then, of course, there's the Windy 2 as well, which is a Trisync. But you're not going to find one of those. So, for anyone who's just looking in chat right now about being late, don't worry too much. I'm going to be uploading this video to YouTube soon. I'm just kind of live broadcasting the recording of it. So, if you missed anything, catch it later. SNK cabinets, they're not bad. They do look pretty cool, but they often tend to be overpriced as a result, just because the people are like, oh, my Neo cab, like, oh, gotta have that Neo Geo Neo Candy action. It's just stupid. And then you have to deal with Neo Geo people. I kid. I love the Neo Geo, but you're getting into that world of expensive Neo Geo stuff and expensive, hard to find Neo Geo parts. So be aware. I wouldn't go with one. Just personal preference for your first cab. They're also, as Anonymous mentions, rare and expensive. Anything else? There were some other cabinets as well. We mentioned some Chinese and Korean knockoff cabs and stuff. And then there's also, the Cyber Lead, the Exalinas. I believe the Exalinas, one of them can't be rotated, or maybe it's a Cyber Lead that can't be rotated. Something like that. Cyber Lead is a decent cabinet. The Madonna is a really cool cabinet. It's kind of the same era as like the Aero City, except they look fucking awesome. I mean, I like the Aero City too, but the Madonna is really sexy. But good luck finding one of those. The point is, if you're starting out, it's best to get something common, like one of the Sega cabinets or the Taito cabinets. Even though they're much rarer, there's a big community for them, so there's a lot of information out there. So, what should you buy? Ooh, this went late. Anyway, what should I buy? Well, here's really the questions you got to ask yourself. What do you want to play, and how much are you willing to spend? If you're going to play 15K JAMA games exclusively, vertical, horizontal, or whatever, or 45 degrees, you want to get a Astro or Blast City, or an Egret too, I would say. I mean, don't turn down a New Net City if there's a good deal for a good one, but those are the cabinets you should be mainly looking towards. If you're going to play some JVS games as well, high-res games, whatever, you'll be looking towards a Blast or a New Net City, or an Egret 3, the Toshiba Pure Flat, preferably. Anything but the Wave, really. Now, with the Blast, I believe some of them came wired for JVS, but everyone I've ever seen, is wired for JAMA. And if they're wired for JAMA, you'll need a JVS I/O board, which just plugs into the JAMA harness. And the thing is that even though you have the JVS I/O board, you won't be using the video output from the JVS I/O board, or the input. You'll just be using the I/O part of it, and you plug the VGA directly into the monitor. Those cost about kind of $100 something bucks. So another thing I would say is don't exclude other cabinets just because I didn't mention them. Like if you see another cabinet and the deal is right, do some research. Now that you've got this info, do some research. You know what the common monitors, etc. are. See if there's any glaring limitations with a cabinet, and if there aren't any, maybe it's worth a shot. One other thing that I actually should have mentioned earlier, as System 11 said, the New Net City does have a really steep monitor angle, so it's kind of like right in your face, so some people may not prefer that. Alright, hang on tight for just a second. I'll be right back. Alright, sorry to leave you guys hanging. Let me just reopen chat real quick. I totally closed it when I shouldn't have. Okay, so other cabs, or sorry, not other cabs. What did I do? Where to buy a cab? A few options here. Craigslist is one option, or Kijiji, which I think is like the Canadian equivalent of Craigslist. Any kind of online classifieds, whatever. The nice thing about this is that, if you're local, of course, you can, visit the cab in person and test it, versus having it shipped. Another option is to check out forums like, System 11, shmups.system11, System 11, the same one that's in chat right now, Arcade Otaku, Neo-Geo, Klove, although Klove is usually, kind of primarily American cab focused, although you will see some Japanese cabinets pop up on there. These are usually a better option, I would say, than eBay for buying remotely, likely because you'll get a better price, and also because, if it's a collector selling it to you and they have a reputation on a forum, it's a little bit of a smaller community, so it's harder for someone to just kind of rip people off and continually get away with it. The next option is eBay, which is, of course, very risky. Make sure you know what you're getting. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point, actually. Buying cabinets and buying things from eBay. Standard eBay warnings apply. Or you could get in on something like a group buy from Japan, or if you're loaded and want to get a lot of cabinets, a full container from Japan. This is usually a good opportunity to get kind of whatever cabinet you want. At hopefully a good price, but coordinating a group buy is expensive in general. And it can be a bit of a gamble at what you get. So, as usual, be careful. Don't do dumb things. Standard buying precautions apply. What to look for when buying. In my opinion, at least, monitor condition is king. Especially if it's a monitor that is, hard to find or come by. Do not settle for a bad monitor. You will never be happy. Don't think, oh, I can make it better. Chances are you probably can't. Yeah, you might be able to make it better, but assume you can't. Make sure the cabinet has no structural damage. As we talked about earlier, like the Astro City control panel surround, Cyberleads often have these weird, like, cracked corners on the top of the cabinet, which is just cosmetic, but, it is something. But make sure there's no major structural damage. Check for hacked up wiring if you can. This can often be fixed, but if you have a problem or you want to convert it to something else or rewire something and it's all fucked to begin with, it's a pain. So take a look, and even if it's something you can fix, you can often use something like that as leverage to be like, hey, this is bad, maybe take X or Y amount off of the price or something like that. And of course, if you get a chance to test in person, test with a cheap board. Some people like get excited and the first board they buy is like some like $700 or $800 board. Make sure you also get a very cheap board with it to test things with, some like $20 game or something that you don't care if it gets blown up. Especially even better if it's a game you hate, so you can always pray for it to get blown up. In my case, Blockout, which I actually love playing, but it's kind of the sacrificial lamb nowadays. So, my current lineup right now, as we saw way back here, we've got an Aero City that is used for horizontal 15K games. You'll notice the bezel is removed from it. That's because, my glass has graffiti on it. That's the nice thing about those cabs too, by the way. They have like tinted glass in front of the monitor, so if you put them out on location and some idiot decides to like scrape it up, at least they'll just scrape the glass. They won't actually scrape the tube, unlike the later cabs with the exposed tubes. Although there is good news for that too, which is that if you have a Blast City and the monitor tube gets scratched, if it hasn't already been removed, you can actually buff off the anti-glare and anti-static coating and get a good tube again. But that's a topic for another video. The Aero City bezel is like the most flimsy, shitty, paper-thin piece of crap. So if you're rotating the monitor ever, you don't want it in there. At least for me, I just have it left off. And I use that for horizontal games, got the 6-button control panel, or 12-button control panel. Then I have a Vert New Astro City with the single-player control panel, which I use for, vertical shooters pretty much exclusively. And then the real workhorse that I stream from most of the time, the New Net City, which is used for low-end, high-res horizontal games, as well as console stuff. And I think I mentioned that here. I guess one other thing, System 11 made a good point. Essential tools. Definitely make sure, get a multimeter. Honestly, even a nice one is good, but like at a very bare minimum, like a cheap, $10 piece of shit Radio Shack one will do. Something. You should definitely get something. I would spend the extra money and get a nice Fluke one or something, but at the very least, have something. If you have a problem with, your 5-volt being too high or too low, even if you don't get the correct exact reading, it's nice to know relatively what your reading is on that meter, stuff like that. For diagnosing, missing video colors and stuff, weak video colors, connectivity problems and stuff like that. They can be really handy. It looks like a TV resting in a box. I mean, kind of. It is a monitor, though. Same one as in a Sega Rally, actually, interestingly. Actually, that one is from a Sega Rally. I also have a Sega Rally. Um, yes. Oh, yes. Get a Torx security driver. A lot of cabinets do still have their Torx stuff on them. And cabinets that didn't have Torx stuff on them now do because America sucks, and this is why we can't have nice things. .jpeg. Let's see. Oh, you'll want some GIS drivers too. JIS, which is basically like a Japanese version of a Phillips driver that's very slightly different, but it's slightly different enough that if you unscrew GIS screws with a Phillips driver enough, you will strip them, and you really don't want to do that. Oh man. Now I do have a really funny photo of what happens if just for fun. Maybe I'll edit this out of the archive, but just for fun here, let's see if I can find this shit. One sec. Oh, maybe I can't find it. Damn it. Anyway, it's, we drilled into a we actually had to sever a screw that was holding a cabinet together because it stripped so hard that there was no way to get it out. Alright, I guess I cannot find it, so sorry about that. I got your hopes up for nothing. Anyway, you should get a GIS driver. You should get a multimeter. Anything else? Obviously, get a soldering station. Get some nice Weller shit. Don't go for cheap stuff because you'll be like, man, I really suck at soldering. And then you'll try and use something nicer and you'll be like, oh, this is so much easier now. It really does make that kind of a difference. So, I'd say that's about it, more or less. And I think, if anyone has any questions in chat, real quick, I'll wait like 2 to 3 minutes for someone to ask questions, and then I'll answer those, and then I'll go to fuck to bed because it's 4:17 a.m. So. Oh, I definitely have this photo. Oh man, it's such a funny photo too. Damn. Is it as expensive as it looks to break into the hobby? I mean, yes, I guess. If you want a kind of more affordable route, you could get something like an Astro for probably like $600 or something. Get a PS360 Plus, which is, a control IO thing for like kind of like $100 or something. And then you could wire up a console for maybe like another $100. So you could spend like $800 and have like a PS1 hooked up to your cabinet. When you start buying circuit boards, that's when things get expensive. And I mean, yes, it does in fact get very, very expensive. All right, any other questions? Damn, I'm so disappointed in myself that I can't find this amazing picture. And I don't know why I didn't think about it ahead of time. Yeah, I'll tweet out the picture later. Um, all right, I think for now, that's basically gonna be it. Yes, it doesn't start getting expensive until you lose your mind and start buying your grails, and then get more grails and buy those as well. And then you have the entire TGM series, and you spent like $4,000, and you want to kill yourself. Um, Not that I would know about that from personal experience or anything. All right, so this was our live video. It took about an hour and 18 minutes. It's incredibly unprofessional. So, unlike this video, the videos that I'll be making from the Patreon will be recorded and higher production value, actually have video. Obviously, I can't do anything nice right now because I'm in Japan and don't have most of my equipment. But I have taken lots of nice photos, and I've gained a lot of experience and a lot of stuff to talk about later. Yes, pinball is way more expensive. An expensive arcade board is probably like 1,000 is like a really expensive arcade board. There's a lot of good games to be had for like 500 or less. There's a lot of good games to be had for like 100 or like 150 to 200. But you know, there are some boards that are upwards of 1,000. Whereas pinball machines are, yes, it's exactly what it is. Is that a cabinet, you know, a monitor or a board might break, you know, irreparably if a custom chip dies on a board that you can't get anymore. Well, you're done. Whereas, you know, with pinball, pretty much every part is available, or parts that aren't available you can still get somehow most of the time. So yeah, pinball I would still say is more expensive, but I don't know. They're two different hobbies, kind of. Okay, so I think we are actually done now. Again, plug in the Patreon, which the URL, if I remember, is patreon.com/KevinDDR. You can find out more about what I'm about and what I hope to be doing in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am actually tired, which is really cool because I have really bad insomnia and I never get tired. So because I've been talking for an hour and 20 straight, I'm actually tired. Sorry if it, yes, 420 blaze it. Sorry if this is incoherent and rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed it, got something out of it, and catch you next time. Have a good